This is NICU Babies Parent Support with Catherine Whitaker, a podcast from Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit that provides free personalized support, resources, and community before, during, and after a NICU stay. My conversations here will focus on education and personal stories with medical and hospital professionals, counselors, therapists, and NICU moms and dads from across the country. Whether you're preparing for a NICU stay, you're currently there, or you're months and years past your stay, you belong here. The NICU is hard. We're here to help. I'm your host, Catherine Whitaker, the mom of 6 children, including my very own NICU baby, and I'm so honored you're here. Hey, y'all, welcome back to the podcast. I'm thrilled to have you here again this week. I am always thinking about what topics would really resonate with y'all who are listening. And I know one that resonated with me, and it was because it was such a struggle in the NICU, was to get our son to gain weight. And how do you do that? Either when your baby is either primarily breastfeeding, or if they can't have anything by mouth, if they're NPO and they're on IV nutrition called TPN, like how do you get your baby to grow? So I decided to talk to someone who had the answers. She is a registered dietitian and also a nutritionist. And we first, I think, are going to tackle what the difference is between a dietitian and a nutritionist, but also what the heck does a dietitian do in the neonatal intensive care unit? So I think that you're really going to love this interview as always. And she's such a great expert, advocate, and enthusiastic dietitian. You're going to love her. Keli Hawthorne is a registered dietitian, and she's the director for clinical research for the Department of Pediatrics at the Dell Medical School at the University of Texas in Austin. Prior to UT, she worked as a NICU dietitian and a researcher for over 15 years. Her research background focuses on neonatal and pediatric nutrition, including mineral absorption, intestinal failure, and human milk fortification for premature infants. That was something that was near and dear to my heart, so I'm really happy to know that that's a big emphasis of hers. Keli was a leader in the national efforts to obtain FDA approval for IV omega-3 fatty acid lipid emulsions for both infants and children in the United States with severe liver damage. She was honored with the Texas Distinguished Scientist Award from the Texas Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and she is a past recipient of the Emerging Dietetic Leader Award and recognized as a Young Dietitian of the Year. She's kind of a big deal. When she's not in Austin, she can be found at her nearby cattle ranch. And with that, let's chat. All right, Keli, I want you to know what an honor it is to have you here. I am the mom of a NICU baby, but certainly a mom who learned a lot about dietetics and nutrition in the NICU that I never thought that I would. And I know that there may be some moms and dads who are listening to this who find themselves in the NICU or maybe are post-NICU and starting to realize the importance of nutrition and dietetics where they were in the hospital. So maybe we should probably start with, what is a nutritionist / dietitian? What is the difference between those two? What is it that they do? I know that you are the expert, so I will let you answer that question.
Sure. I get asked that question all the time. So I'm happy to answer and help educate people. So I'm a registered dietitian, and the difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist is, the simplest way to talk about it is that there's no legal definition for the term nutritionist. So anybody can call themselves a nutritionist. So you could call yourself a nutritionist right now, or somebody with a PhD in nutrition could call themselves a nutritionist. And there's actually no legal identifiable way to understand what somebody's regulations and credentials are. So some dietitians may also refer to themselves as a nutritionist because it's a little bit more acceptable in the public. They all think dietitians wear hairnets and cook the food in the hospital cafeteria. And that's not at all what I went to school for, to get 2 degrees in nutrition for. So to be a registered dietitian, you do have to have an undergraduate degree from an accredited university. And then you have to go through an internship program, which is about 1,000 hours of internship work. And that's through also an accredited program. And by accreditation, that also means that other organizations have oversight with our group. So like the American Medical Association has connections with our group as well to make sure that our program is up to standards. And then after you do your internship and graduate, then And then you have to pass a national board exam. So much like other healthcare professionals, you have to do that. And then also like other healthcare professionals, you have to keep up your continuing education hours. And so that's mandatory that we have to submit documentation that we are keeping up with everything that's new and ongoing. And especially nutrition, boy, you talk about a field where everything's changing constantly. So you definitely have to keep up with those continuing education hours. And so that is what encompasses for a dietitian. And they've recently changed it over the past few years so that now you're required not only to have an undergraduate degree, but it's required that you have a master's degree in nutrition. So
Wow.
I have a master's degree, but I was actually grandfathered in because I got my dietitian so long ago. But now they do require a master's degree too. So you can see there's a significant difference between what is a dietitian and what is a nutritionist. Now, in the hospital setting, parents don't need to worry about this because the hospital has already figured out these differences, and the accrediting bodies that govern hospitals know what these differences are too. And so because of that, every nutrition expert that you're going to come across in the hospital setting is going to be a registered dietitian.
I love people that love what they do. You clearly love being a nutritionist, but more importantly, a dietitian. That's what you got both of your degrees in. So why dietetics? Like, why was that the career that you chose? And specifically, you're not just dietetics, but with a real emphasis in pediatrics. So why that specialty?
I was always interested in high school with health and the body and how we are created and made and how everything just works together so well. And so that was very much interesting. And I love science and math and so then to see how much of an impact nutrition can make on a person's health is really amazing and fascinating to me as well. And I remember back when I was in high school, and my dad actually had a heart attack and was diagnosed with diabetes at the same time. And my mom talked to the hospital dietitian. We didn't even know what a dietitian was back then. Our family didn't. And then she totally changed how she cooked for our family. And she went from cooking, fried chicken and chicken fried steak every night to grilled chicken and salads, and everything. And she really made a dramatic change in our whole family about how we ate and to see that impact on health in my own family. And then so then I learned more about this field and wanted to become interested in that. But I really loved the very precise nature of nutrition in an acute care setting, and in particular in the ICU setting. And I really appreciated that I could make such a difference as a dietitian and especially in children's lives. And so that's what first brought me to pediatrics, most specifically directly to the NICU. So I did go from working in my first job was with adults, and my very next job was in the NICU. And so I just really
It's a
loved,
swing.
yeah, quite a swing. All for the best. All for the best. And the hospital that I first worked in, they'd never had a NICU dietitian before. They didn't even know like what a patient to dietitian ratio should be. And so I just jumped right in. And thankfully, there was a dietitian in Dallas that was in Fort Worth. And there was a dietitian in Dallas that was my biggest resource. And, I just became her best friend, her little shadow, and absorbed everything that I could from her. And then there's only two NICU dietitian training programs in the country. And so one of those is in Houston. And so I went there and got into the training program. And then from that got a job offer that was NICU and then also research in NICU and in general pediatrics. And so that's kind of how my career kind of came about. But it started from just an interest in medicine and health, but wanting to be in a position where I could really make an impact in people's lives. And when it comes to being a NICU dietitian, I cannot think of a better way to make an impact in kids' lives and in families' lives, because I get to be part of a team, and I get to be a part of, you want your child to be able to come off the ventilator? Great. Their lungs need to grow. That's nutrition. We need their, this to grow. Great. That's nutrition, and so I was so excited to be a part of the team that I could really see I was making an impact on.
I'm wishing that you had been in my NICU. We had a great dietitian, but I do love that we have been blessed with some amazing specialists, as I'm sure many of the people listening will echo that sentiment that their PD specialists are really special people. But as I'm thinking about our days in the NICU, I mean, our son was NPO, so nothing by mouth for weeks. He had an illness called necrotizing enterocolitis, which is an intestinal infection that eats away at your bowel. And once your bowel dies, it doesn't come back. But it certainly impacted how he ate and received nutrition in the NICU, like TPN. I love how when I went to NICU school, I learned all the acronyms. But yeah, so he was on TPN, basically,
Mhm,
IV nutrition.
mhm.
Um, so if a parent is finding themselves in the NICU, Kelly, and they are feeling maybe overwhelmed because their baby isn't growing or their baby isn't getting the nutrition that they need, what are some things or some questions that maybe they should either ask their neonatologist or the dietitian, depending upon the structure, whether it's family centered care or not? What are some things that they should ask that a dietitian may be able to assist with?
I love this question because I loved talking to parents and helping them through this. This is such a stressful time for parents. I
Yes.
mean, I can't imagine anything more stressful. And so we know that in the NICU. And so we're not only there providing care and supporting your baby, we know we have to support those families too. So education is very important. And so when we're thinking about those scenarios, several things come to mind. Talk to your neonatologist and your dietitian about growth charts. Like you often come in every day and like the first thing is like, did the baby gain weight overnight? Like that's what everyone wants to know, even on the whole team. Did the baby gain weight? Yes, he gained 25 grams. He gained 24 grams. Like
Yes.
it's every gram counts, and oh my gosh, if he only gained 4 grams, or if heaven forbid he lost weight, like it's drama. Growth curves will also help you understand day to day is important because day to day leads you to trends over time, but it's those trends over time that really matter. So talking with your dietitian about, let's look at the growth curves and see how is weight doing, how is length doing, how is our head circumference doing. All three of those things really matter, and we want to be growing appropriately. We don't want to see what you don't want to see is maybe the thing that would be cause for concern is crossing over percentile lines. You want to be kind of on the same trajectory. If you cross over too much or go down too fast, then we need to assess and find out what's going on. So is it fluid shifts and all of a sudden they're retaining a lot of water, and so they gained weight, but they actually gained too much weight and something
Right.
is off there. So either direction too fast is something to be indicative of, let's pay more attention and find out what's going on with this. So talking with your team about growth curves, talking with your team about the nutrition that your baby's getting, whether, like you said, that's TPN, which is the intravenous nutrition, and finding out, again, that may not change a whole lot day to day, but there's little tweaks made. And so parents can talk to the dietitian too about like, what were some changes that y'all made to the TPN today? And there might not have been any change, but maybe, well, we noticed his sodium was a little low, so we put in a little bit extra sodium, and that, I think communicating those types of things can help parents understand how much we are really caring for their baby. Of course, they know we're caring for them,
Right.
but to hear it in terms of like, okay, they saw this and they've already made the adjustment, and then tomorrow's labs are even better, things like that. Talking to your dietitian even about either the formula or the breast milk products that they might be getting. If you don't have enough breast milk, or, are you interested, and does your hospital have the ability to provide donor human milk? So that's become more available in the more recent years, where donor milk is available at the hospital. And so if you don't have milk, then maybe that's something that you can consider. So talking to them about that, what's the availability of that? Asking the dietitian, okay, so our baby is on this formula. We've never heard of that before. It's not one, I had a term kid who did great and I just fed him regular formula. I've never heard of this one before. What can you tell me about this one? Because those dietitians know the ins and out of those formulas. They're going to be able to explain it in terms that you can understand. So sometimes those, especially the proteins, need to be a little bit broken down more than what their baby is able to tolerate. And so wonderfully, we have a formula that can match that need, and so we will start with that. And if they need If they don't tolerate that as well as we'd like to see, maybe they did better, but not as good as we'd like to see, then we could move on to the next one that's broken down even more. I wouldn't want to switch from one extreme to the other, because maybe they don't need the far extreme, and maybe they'd be just fine in this middle ground. And that's what we would hope for, honestly, is the middle one. But if they need that, we've got that, and so we've got that available. There's also been concerns over the past year or so, I guess during the pandemic, about formula shortages. I mean, if you're trying to buy formula in the grocery stores, you've seen those grocery store aisles. They're so empty. It's just scary. Even I've had friends and relatives who've had babies in this time, and even out of town, getting emails like from up in Fort Worth and Dallas. Hey, Kelly, can you check in Austin and find out, do you have such and such formula around there? Ship it to me. So the stress about that and worry and anxiety, please talk to your dietitian about that too, because maybe you're worried about something that may not even apply to you once the time it's right for your baby to go home.
Right.
So there's all those types of things. I'll mention another thing about breast milk too. I would get these questions all the time I'm sorry, I'm just kind of gone on and on.
No. Actually, let me, because I do want to dive into breast milk, because you mentioned a lot of different options. So I was a breastfeeding mom, breastfeeding my baby, but I don't think I realized until I had a baby in the NICU. I have 6 children, but I had nursed 4 other babies, and then I had my NICU baby. I didn't realize the caloric content of my breast milk and what he was getting. So while I was able to give him some breast milk, I remember the neonatologist saying, but we need more calories. Like we need him to gain weight, but your breast milk doesn't have enough calories. So then we started talking about fortification of breast milk. So you've got regular breast milk, you've got fortified breast milk, then you have donor milk, which sometimes gets fortified, and then you have formula, there are 18 million kinds of formula, and babies always choose the most expensive formula. That's the one that they always need. So that's a lot of options to feed the baby, particularly. So if they're not TPN, if they're not receiving TPN, or they're not, no feeds by mouth, they can obviously receive. That's their biggest source of nutrition. What are some questions that moms should ask particularly when it comes to fortification? Like, I guess, what's the ideal? Is the ideal breast milk, then breast milk with fortification, then formula? Or I guess I'm asking you that question. I'm like, what's the ideal? And then what are the options within all those ideals?
Sure. So happy to answer all of that, because that also comes down to exactly what we're doing in the NICU all the time. I get asked a lot, how can I increase my milk production?
Yes.
I don't have enough milk. How can I increase that? That's hard. It is hard to do. Of course, your lactation consultant can help with that. The best thing that you can do is remember that is a supply and demand process. And so pumping on a regular schedule every 3 hours is the best thing that you can do. That is hard. That is hard when you're stressed. That is hard when you have 4 children at home that you're already trying to, be a mom to, and you're spending time with this NICU baby. That is hard to do. So, but pumping frequently, and then number 2, staying hydrated yourself, which is hard because now you have to drink and then go to the bathroom all the time. But
just when you get settled, yes.
Right.
I will say, though, every time I pumped, because I was pumping in the middle of the night, every time I pumped, I was like, what else do I have to do? So I called the charge nurse and I would say, tell me how my baby's doing. And I would get the 20-minute report. And then I was like, I'll call you in 3 more hours. So at least there was the benefit of, while he was in the NICU and I was pumping, at least I was able to get an update on him. The night shift is a little bit different crowd than the day shift. So it was if there was a silver lining, that was it. At least I was able to hear how he was doing.
That is an excellent parent pro tip, I have to say, because the night shift, it's a little quieter. There's there's no procedures and all that stuff that's happening, and they have that time. So,
well, I credit them with his terrible sleep schedule, because they were always holding him in the middle of the night when I called, and I'm like, y'all have to stop holding him because he is never going to sleep when he gets home. This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit, but we're more than simply a podcast. Be sure to download our app, join one of our support groups, or find one-to-one support, enjoy counseling, find loss and bereavement support, participate in a peer-to-peer mentor program, or check out our news, articles, and family stories at handtohold.org. All of that is at no cost to you. Hand to Hold's mission is to provide personalized support before, during, and after a NICU stay to help ensure that all NICU families thrive.
Another thing that I get asked a lot is, how can I increase the calories of my breast milk? Like you were saying, and I even hate to use the phrase like your breast milk doesn't have enough calories. I tried to do whatever I can to avoid using that word enough, because the moms just feel that my body is not enough. My breast milk is not enough for my baby. And so I'd like to rephrase it and just say that your baby needs more because your baby maybe was born prematurely, or your baby has some other restrictions for volume. Maybe we can't give them as much volume. And so we have to concentrate things more, and so for the different reasons, because I just don't, moms are already dealing with so much with the NICU. And so I don't like to add to that. But again, it's very hard to do this. You really cannot change the calorie levels. I wish I could tell everybody, just go drink 3 milkshakes a day and you'll change your milk from 16 calories an ounce to 20 calories an ounce. But the body just doesn't work that way. Yeah,
Can I eat more ice cream? I know, if only I could eat more ice cream and increase it that way.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
there's very slight changes that you can make. Like if you went from eating no fish to like fish almost every day, you're still not going to change your calorie levels. You can change somewhat of the fatty acid profile of the milk, very marginally. So I'm not going to say, because I don't want somebody to be like, wait a second, there is a way, but it's not enough to impact like the caloric basis. And so for that, we do need fortification.
Can I ask you this about when you talked about pumping and supply and demand? I know sometimes just in the normal cycle of the day, like when I would feed my baby, I would have more milk supply in the morning and less milk supply in the evening. Like, is there an ideal time if you're going to try to, because maybe if you have other children at home, or you're working and you're trying to figure out, when am I going to squeeze in feed so I can keep up my milk supply? At least whatever I can give to my baby, I can give. Is there an ideal time to do that, to pump?
I mean, the ideal time is when you can. So,
Okay.
The more that you can, and any more that you can provide, we will take. And there's some moms that just can't. And so we understand that. And so for that reason, we do have some donor milk options available too. If you know your own body, and if you have a little bit more flexibility in your time schedule, and know, like, I usually get more volume in the morning, so I'm going to make it a priority that I always get that morning pump. And if you can do that, then that's great too. But really whatever you can do is just going to be wonderful.
I think some moms may have needed to hear that you do what you can and it will always be enough. So I'm going to ask you this. So this is fancy. I'm going to read this. So you spearheaded, or an integral part, I'm going to say integral part, you correct me if I'm wrong, FDA approval for IV, so intravenous omega-3 fatty acid lipid emulsions. Yes, you did
It's a
that. That
mouthful.
sounds, yeah, it is. That's why I read it. That's why I wrote it down. So what does that mean for the average NICU baby? If there is an average NICU baby, for any NICU baby, I should say.
Sure. Okay, so let me paint this picture for you of what happened. So in the United States, we only had one option of a type of IV fat that we could give adults or kids. It's a soy-based fat, and so that we had one choice. If you had a baby, or if your baby was born very premature, and so we can't even give them breast milk into their tummies because their intestines are not working yet. Even if we put breast milk down there, it's just going to curdle and cause problems. So they've got to be fed TPN. And if they're born very prematurely, they may need to be on that TPN for many months. You might even have a term baby that maybe has some kind of intestinal situation, like an omphalocele, or even a perforation, something like that with their intestines, where again, we can't put milk in there. We can't put formula in there because it's not working right. And so for those, again, that kid might need to be on TPN long-term for many months. So TPN is life-saving. Like, if we didn't have TPN,
maybe explain what TPN. So for someone who may not know what TPN is, what is TPN?
Sure.
I guess
we've been throwing around our NICU vocabulary.
I know. Sorry, everybody.
TPN stands for total parenteral nutrition, which just means that we're feeding through the vein. So we're able to give fluids, but in the form of protein, carbohydrates, lipids, all of our fats. We're giving vitamins, we're giving minerals, we're giving that little bit of fraction of water too, because even babies need that. So all of that is going intravenously, and it gets immediately absorbed because it's all directly going into the bloodstream. Whereas when we eat something, whether it's you and I eating real food or our babies eating milk and formula, that goes through our digestive process, and only part of it gets absorbed into the bloodstream, and then they excrete the rest of it. And that's what we want to see, peeing and pooping and diapers and stuff like that too. So that's totally normal. And that we want to see those outputs, inputs and outputs, or I's and O's is another acronym that we're concerned about in the NICU. And so we need this intravenous nutrition. We need this TPN to be able to support life for our babies if they need that. But the problem is that in particular, this type of fat that we only had the one choice of can become very toxic to the liver if babies have to be on it for a long time. So I wouldn't say this necessarily impacts like every kid, or even that, like you said, what is an average NICU baby? But it's for those who need to be receiving intravenous nutrition for a long term, for several months. And that is still quite a few babies in our NICUs. Sure. So what happened was my boss at the time saw this case report, first out of Boston Children's, and they had imported a different type of fat that they used in two of their babies that had liver disease. And because what we were seeing before then, it was toxic to the liver up to the point where if babies had to be on it for a long time, we would see up to 70% of those babies either not surviving or needing a liver transplant. And then of those that got a transplant, only 50% of those survived. So it was a significant thing to take a look at. So Boston Children's reported that they used a different type of fat. Instead of a soy-based, they used a fish oil-based lipid instead, that they imported from Germany, and under FDA protocol procedures and things like that, for experimental use that this hasn't been used before. So, anyway, my boss hands this to me and says, if Boston can do it, we can do it. And I was like, what do you mean? Call the FDA and find out how we get this stuff. I'm like, what are you talking about? I am just a little NICU dietitian. What do you mean call the FDA? I didn't even know you could do that. So I spent a lot of time working on this and talking to the FDA and figuring out the paperwork, talking with Boston. We copied their protocol. The FDA wanted us to do that so that later on, and we did merge our data sets together so that we could present even more data to the FDA. And this was a many years process, and but we got it imported. There was even a hang up because it's a fish oil product. I had to get a vet permit because it was considered an animal product. I mean, you just would not believe.
Wow. No, I would believe it. I would believe it.
Yeah, right. All the red tape. So we got it, and we started using it, and we saw improvements from the rates I told you before to using this fish oil product, less than 5% of babies. And it's gone down from that. So a huge impact on outcomes for these babies.
Y'all saved so many babies' lives. I'm just thinking of those families whose lives were permanently impacted by that.
Yeah, so many. So now we have enough data that we have given to the FDA, and we have some it's been approved for in adults, and there's some recommendations about how to use it in the NICU. But we also have a second new product, which is a blended product. And so that's a combination of, if you took the fish oil and the soybean oil and kind of put them together, it's a little harder, it's a little more sophisticated than that.
I believe you though.
But imagine like a blended product. And then, so we jumped on that really quickly. And so our hospital was the first hospital in the United States to use the blended product. And I remember identifying the first family and approaching them with the neonatologist and talking with them to describe how we wanted their permission to use this new therapy in their baby, and that their baby was going to be the first person ever, adult or child, to receive this in the United States. And yet it has been used in Europe for many years, for a couple of decade or so by that point. And we had really good confidence in it. It was actually a less severe product than the study product we've been using that was the first fish oil only product. Her baby wasn't that sick. So this blended product is more for prevention of TPN. It's called TPN associated cholestasis. It just means liver disease that you got because you were on TPN. And so the liver disease associated with that. And so the pure fish oil one is for the treatment of that. And the blended product is for the prevention of that. And just kind of talking too about the risks and benefits and with the parents, and kind of recognizing, if you were to look around at everything in this NICU, somebody's baby was the first one that got this, and this is how we make advances. And this is how research is so important in medicine. And so we do hope to see better outcomes in your baby. And we hope to see better outcomes in every baby after your baby. And so she agreed. The baby did so well on it. We started collecting data. We started putting more babies on it. And now that product, which is called SMOF, which is not a great name.
Another acronym. I love it. It's okay.
Another acronym, like we don't have enough. It stands for soybean oil, medium chain triglycerides, olive oil, and fish oil. So it describes the blend of the products, but that is now much more widely available. You don't even need to be on a research study to get it. And so because of the work that I was involved with and helped with and did, we've come that far to where we've gone from, we had to import this and I had to get a vet permit from Germany to now it's in hospitals in most locations, and they're using it to even prevent this from happening. And so that really, this story, Catherine, I have to say, this is the most rewarding thing of my entire career. Is being a part.
I can imagine it would. I mean, and certainly as a mom who was the beneficiary of really educated, passionate dietitians, certainly allowed our son to grow, allowed him to thrive through some very difficult moments, both in the NICU and then later in the PDICU, that had it not been for someone watching out for his nutrition and really involving us in those decisions, he wouldn't be a healthy, feisty seventh grader. So I know that there are lots of parents, moms, dads, and caregivers listening to this who maybe didn't know anything about dietetics before they walked into the NICU. But I'm hoping that today gave them a little bit more assurance, but also some encouragement that strides continue to be made every day in the NICU because parents are open to allowing y'all to try new things to save more babies. So if there's someone, I guess I always like to ask, this is always my last question that I ask, is what's your best advice to a parent who is sitting in the NICU and their baby is in dire need of excellent dietetic care? What either encouragement would you give to them, advice would you give to them, or a question that you think that they should ask?
Sure, absolutely. Reach out, find out who your NICU dietitian is, and work with them. Find out, if they, who is their support group as well. We have a NICU Dietitian Association, and we share resources and knowledge. And even, so we're, like I mentioned at the top, we're doing continuing education in a more formal setting, but you can't stop us from talking to each other either. So we're constantly, whether it's at a conference or on Facebook with each other in our NICU dietitian Facebook group, sharing information and learning more and more. And so as for parents, I would definitely say, reach out to that dietitian, just like you would reach out, like you were saying, you would call the bedside nurse. Now your dietitian is not going to be in there in the middle of the night.
Don't call her at 3 a.m.
Yeah, she won't answer. But talk to your dietitian and use her as the resource, just like you would to that NICU nurse in the bedside or your respiratory therapist. All of the team members. We are, like I said, we're here to care for your baby, but we know that baby's going home with you, and we are here to care for you too. So asking us all of your questions, whether that's about breastfeeding or formula or where things are at now and where you're headed in the future. And like, what does a home plan look like? And what kinds of things should we be looking for and watching for, and how does this compare? If you already have other children, like what are your experiences and how have things compared? And really, like, NICU dietitians are in this because we love it. And so we love talking about your babies and nutrition. So we are excited to talk about that and answer questions. And, then once you start talking to us about your own nutrition, that's where we kind of like, oh, yeah, you're a big person. I don't know anything about you anymore. And so
I'm going to need you to be about 1,600 kilograms in order for me to give good advice. No, that's awesome. Thank you for the good encouragement, but also for the advice that you gave, and also the hope that I hope that you gave some parents that there are lots of people in the NICU that want to help their babies thrive. So thank you, Keli.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
I love nothing more than talking to people who are passionate about what they believe in and what they do on the daily basis. And I'm not sure that there is a more enthusiastic guest I've ever had than Keli Hawthorne, who is a dietitian. There are many things that Keli shared in our interview, but in my typical 2-minute takeaway, I wanted to share a couple of things that really stood out to me. One, and I hope that every parent, caregiver, mom and dad listening to this heard this, is that the NICU is not static. There are strides and there are procedures and there are things that happen in research every day that will save the life of a baby tomorrow that they couldn't save today. And that gave me a lot of encouragement. It's been 13 years since I was in the NICU. So to hear that major strides are being made to give babies the best possible chance of walking out the door with their moms and their dads and their families was so encouraging to me. So I hope that was encouraging to you as well. And then the second part was, I never know what someone's NICU experience may be like, whether it's family-centered care or another one, but you are your baby's best advocate. So if your baby is not growing, so when Keli was talking about the growth charts, is your baby trending upward? That was always the thing that the neonatologist reminded us, like, is your baby trending upward? And so those were great questions to ask a dietitian, saying, hey, I need to speak to the NICU dietitian, where can we go from here? So you have a lot of people who are on your team and want to see you just thrive and grow in the NICU and be there on the hard days. So ask for help. And with that, I will see y'all next time. Thanks, y'all, for listening to NICU Babies Parent Support. Every parent and every experience is welcome here. If you are a NICU parent and you're finding yourself in need of support, please download our app. You can find it in the Apple Store or on Google Play, Hand to Hold. And if you love today's episode, you can share it, you can subscribe, and you can most certainly review it. We would love, love, love your reviews. It's how we reach more NICU parents. Thanks, and I'll see y'all next time.